Thanks, Wendell. No, that's okay. I'll pull it up in a little bit. It's fine. Thanks for having me, guys, and appreciate you coming out on this really hot night. So yeah, you heard the introduction. I'm John, and feel free to interrupt at any point with any questions. I just thought I'd kind of walk through my little journey to where I've come so far and where I hope to go from there. But yeah, so I started, I was convinced when I went to school at University of Illinois that I was going to be a history teacher. That's my parents were teachers. I loved history. And my mom said to me, she's like, you know, you grew up basically with a microphone. You had this dream. Don't take the safe route and try to do journalism. And about my sophomore year or so, I walked into a radio station on campus, and I just kind of introduced myself, and they said, okay, you kind of got a good voice. The sports reporter didn't show up today, so why don't you go ahead and anchor our sports report? And that is basically how my career has gone for the last 10 years, given strange opportunities just by showing up and kind of being present. After working at that radio station in college, which you guys have a lot of similar internet radio stations, and ours was a broadcast one on the FM dial. It was awesome. I made so many mistakes. I learned a lot of cool things in those 3 or 4 years. And then when I graduated from the university, they actually offered me a job to stay on as the advisor for the college radio station, as the adult babysitting like 160 college kids as a 21-year-old, which was really fascinating. I was just happy to stay in a college town for a couple more years. I wasn't quite ready to leave, which was great. But that was really like the formative time. And it kind of aligned kind of with what you guys are doing here, in that you do everything. I was really lucky. I'd like mostly focused on news when I was a student, but running the radio station, we had to worry about production. We'd started doing play-by-play broadcasts for the hockey team, and sales, all those sorts of things. So it was really like a trial by fire. And it's a lesson that I kind of learned, and I advise to anyone at any job you can get, in this business, to do everything you possibly can there, even if you have no real interest in it per se, or don't think that it's going to be something that it's going to be the core of your career moving forward, to soak up as much as you can, because it all kind of comes in handy years later. But the most fortuitous thing that happened to me when I was running this radio station, come on in. The luckiest thing that ever happened to me is I decided to start an alumni network. We had all these great graduates of WPGU. Come on in, guys. Don't worry about it. And you can come on in. Look at this. We're filling up. Everyone can hear me down the hallways. That's what it is. We started this alumni network. So all these great, Robin Baumgartner, Melissa Foreman, Gene Honda, Charlie Myerson, names that some of you may recognize, and I'm just scratching the surface. A lot of guys at The Score, a lot of people at WGN Radio, some of the TV stations. They had all kind of come from this college radio station, but there wasn't really a good alumni network. And so I was doing it, come on in, I was doing it for the students to set up this alumni network, but I was also doing it to meet a lot of great people. And the one thing I learned as a 22, 23-year-old is that if you ask someone to grab a cup of coffee in this business, they are more than willing to do it. And that's all I would do. I would just, email someone out of the blue or call them and say, hey, we have this kind of loose connection. You don't know who I am, but I would love to pick your brain over a coffee or a beer or something. And that started a lot of interesting relationships that I've kept for years, and has led to a lot of really cool opportunities. So that is like my lesson number one for anyone looking for networking. Because I know networking is this word that we use and we toss around, and it can come off as brown-nosing, it can come off as just asking for a job, but the way I'd approach it, and I recommend for everyone, and you guys are all, well, anytime you want to grab me too, I live in the Ukrainian village, I'm happy to pop in, ask someone out for coffee or for a beer just to chat, and just pick their brain, talk through it, be like a human connection to them, because I found that the worst kind of networking is sending someone your resume and being like, can you look this over, and if you have any jobs, let me know. The best kind of networking is being a curious person, sitting down and being interested in what they're doing. Because as I'm sure many of you guys are too, us people in broadcast, we just love to talk about ourselves sometimes, so we'd love to share our stories and things along those lines. So that's a real good lesson I learned right out of college. And then I left media altogether. I thought I was done with it. The radio station was going down the tubes. It was probably mostly my fault. Not really, but they, I was running the show and it wasn't doing so great. This is right when the economy kind of tanked. So I left it all. I actually quit. I put in my 2 weeks notice, And it was 2010 at the time, and I had a couple friends that lived in Washington, D.C., and I thought I always wanted to do politics. So I packed up my Nissan Xterra with like 160,000 miles on it and just moved to Washington, D.C. To try politics. I thought that was going to be the next thing that I wanted to do. And I got an internship with Senator Roland Burris. I don't know if that name rings a bell. He was nominated by Rod Blagojevich right before Blagojevich was sent to prison for that nomination. So Blagojevich was only there for 2 years, and I only tell you this story because it's an interesting little side route, but another lesson learner. I actually went into the office because I had a friend that worked there, and they said, no more internships. We're not doing any more internships. I'm like, I just moved across the country to try something. And the chief of staff said, he's like, okay, John, are you any good at softball? And I said, yeah, sure, I'm good at softball. I'm not really good at softball. But he was like, our team has lost every game this year. If you come tonight and we win, I'll give you an internship. And I was like, okay. So he put me at shortstop and batted third. I think I went 0 for 4 and did terrible. But it was that sort of moxie, I guess you could say, just saying yes. I'll show up. I'll do anything. And even though it wasn't a media job, it really kind of showed me that a lot of times people are just looking for someone that's willing to stick their neck out there and try something new. So I got an internship, and another lesson about always being there and always being present. Roland Burris was leaving office. He wasn't running for re-election. So slowly but surely, all the staffers left. They all went to work for campaigns, other people like that. So I was kind of the last one left. So they're like, do you want to be our speechwriter? So I got to be a speechwriter for a senator just because I was one of the last people left on the ship. And it was absurd as like a 26-year-old to be able to write speeches for a senator. It was a great experience. I had no idea what I was doing, but I went by the motto that I still go by today, is fake it till you make it. When given an opportunity, even if you have no real knowledge of what you might be doing, say yes and figure it out. Do your research, do your homework, and show up and give it a shot. People respect that, and you're going to make mistakes along the way. So I did that. And then all the Democrats got voted out of office, so there were no jobs in Washington. And so I was like, well, I guess I'll move back to Chicago. Rent in Washington is like, I was paying like $1,300 a month, and I'd like drained through my savings. And I was like, all right, okay, I'll move back to Chicago. Moved back in with my parents at the age of 26, which was exciting. And I was just looking for anything. In the transition back to Chicago, what I did, I just called every person I knew, those connections that I had made a couple years earlier, just call and just ask, do you know of anything? Because I'd already gotten to know these people and I felt comfortable talking with them. And one person, she wasn't even in Chicago anymore, but she knew the director of the what's now called Total Traffic. Metro Shadow Traffic used to be the name, but the people that do traffic reporting for all Chicago radio stations and TV stations, or about half of them. And she said, look, I know the guy. I can send your name across. I don't know what he's got. And he called me, and he said, I don't have anything. But we're always looking for people. So he said, why don't you come in for an interview? He said, can you do tomorrow? Which was, I could, but the problem was I was across the country in Washington, D.C. when he made the phone call and asked me to come tomorrow. And I was like, well, getting in the car and drove back to Chicago. I had nothing else to do in D.C., so I moved back to Chicago, or I drove back, did the interview. And, he kind of asked about my time and my experiences, but the one question he asked, this was a couple weeks before Christmas, he said, can you work Christmas Eve into Christmas morning, the overnight shift? And I said, yeah, sure, why not? And then 2 days later, he hired me, and he said one of the main reasons was because I was willing to do that shift that no one else wanted to do. And I had nothing else. So there's going to be so many moments as you transition and you leave this place, and I'm sure you guys already are doing some internships and know a lot of people. That transition is going to be so many moments of swallowing your pride. Like I wasn't thinking like, oh man, this is the first. I mean, I knew that this was a good first step, but there's moments you just gotta. Okay, yeah, absolutely, I'm excited. This will be great. And then you go home, and then you complain to everyone else you want to complain to, but not to the boss. So I did. He hired me for 0 guaranteed hours, making $11 an hour as a producer. It wasn't even an on-air gig. And then Snowmageddon happened about a month into my job there. I was working as a producer, and the WGN traffic person couldn't show up. They couldn't make it in. Does everyone remember Snowmageddon, people stuck on Lakeshore Drive? So they're like, John, you're here. Go ahead, get on the mic. You might know this. Okay. And the next WGN traffic reporter didn't show up for about 15 to 20 hours. So I did about 15 hours, 16 hours of traffic on WGN. They kind of made like a game out of it, like, is John still alive in the traffic studio? Let's go to John Hansen in the traffic studio. And it was great. I mean, it was scary, it was frightening, but act as if ye have faith, I guess, and just jump into it. Trust what you've been taught and go for it. From there, GN asked if I could be a backup more and more. For about 2 years, I slowly picked up many more shifts till I became basically a full-time employee just doing all the fill-in shifts. And while that may not seem great, it was the biggest blessing in disguise. I got to fill in at CBS Chopper 2 in the helicopter. At Fox Television, when one of the reporters went on maternity leave, I got to be the traffic reporter for a little bit. BBM overnight. I mean, like, just say yes to every single thing you can, and slowly but surely. Another piece of wisdom, I guess you could say, or something I've learned in my short career, is that these are long careers. I think we all look to, like, what are we doing right now? What can we do? Where we can be next year? But it's the whole journey that really is important, and it's the people that put in the time and the steps and the energy for all the little things along the way, and recognize that there's going to be moments, again, as I said, where you swallow your pride and do that sort of stuff. So for like 3 years, I was a traffic reporter. Eventually, I went to a full-time shift there. Well, at one point, I say yes to everything, and I think that's really important. It's also really important to let your bosses or the people that you work for know what your dream is and what you want to do. Not necessarily to expect it the next day, but to be aggressive in saying, look, I'm happy to do whatever you need me to do, but here is something that I think I can do real well. And that's what I did at Clear Channel. I said, look, I love doing traffic. I'm going to be here until you tell me not to be, but I have an interest in news. I think I can do more. And there was months go by, and you kind of tell them, but the next time there was an opportunity for a news job, they came to me, and they said, you've been bugging us about this enough. We're opening up a news bureau here for Clear Channel, and we want you to run it. And I thought, this is great. It was a little bit of a pay bump. I had benefits. I was like riding high. I was like, this is awesome. They're like, it's overnights. And I was like, sure, that sounds great. It was an overnight gig. Didn't really like it that much, but showed up every day and did it. And this is the other thing, is when you start to get these experiences, start to parlay that into other stuff. Show off your resume. I mean, once you get on a station or wherever you work, or whether it's radio, TV, web, start to show that, this is what I've done, and here's where I think I can go with this. So I went right to WGN, where I had done traffic, because I was off the traffic beat now. And I said, look, I'm running this news bureau. How about I be a fill-in news anchor on your station? And they said, oh, that's a great idea. I mean, sometimes it's just as simple as walking in and asking for things. And they trained me, and I got to be a GN news anchor, which proved to be a great point in my career to learn that sort of stuff. So I thought everything was going great. I didn't like the overnights, but I knew it was on the right progression. And then, are you guys familiar with DNAinfo.com? So they had just started, and I got a call from some guy, and he's like, oh, DNA Info is this website. I'm like, yeah, I've heard of it. And they want to start a radio station. Would you come in for an interview? And I thought, what the heck is this thing? I ain't going to go. I'll go to the interview. I'll go talk to these people. There's no way I'm taking the job. But they really sought after me. They're like, we're trying this new thing with internet radio. And I went back to Clear Channel, and they offered me some bigger job. And it was this moment of taking a leap. And do I leave this traditional media thing where I'm running this news bureau, but it's not exactly quite what I want? Or do I try something new, exciting? And eventually, and it was the best decision I ever made, I took that leap into the world of internet. I left broadcasting, the FM, AM dial, and TV for the internet, which some people thought was crazy. A lot of my coworkers thought I was crazy. But that's another thing I would advise anyone to do, is anytime, especially early in your careers, to pick up as many skills as you can. And it was a whole different thing. They do social media so well. I didn't really know much about social media. They do they do everything on the internet so well. They do reporting so well. It's a lot more serious news reporting. So I kind of leapt at it, and I didn't know exactly what it was. And the first month was real rough, but we actually did. We started this radio station, and now it's just, it lives in, I don't know if you've been to the site, but you see radio embeds in the stories. That was what we started. That's what we did. And within 6 months, we were at 600,000, 700,000 listeners a month, which is crazy. We were selling ads. and it was great. And again, I didn't know, had no idea that that was where my path was going to take me. And then with that, I kind of, as I say, parlaying stuff you've done before. You know, I went to DNA Info. I said, why don't, you know, you're a new website. Why don't we go on Fox? Why don't we go on GN and tell our stories there? And I'll be the one to do it for you. So having those ideas and being like, hey, I think, and it didn't happen right away, but hey, I think this could be a really cool thing. I have these connections. Why don't we do that? So again, it was like standing up for what you've done and what you know what you're doing and advising a company to do that. So they let me do that, which was great. I was on Fox a couple times a week, just little segments telling our stories. We started a daily segment on GN Radio. I had a relationship there, just to like, I mean, anytime you can get on air, even if it's like for 30 seconds, that's what our report was on GN, 30 seconds a day. It was like, you soak up every second you can of those opportunities, and you pour your soul into those moments, because they're few and far between, as you guys know here, especially in the Chicago market. So I was doing that, it was great, and all of a sudden I got a call from WCIU'S executive producer for their morning show. And he's like, hey, I saw you on Fox. Do you want to join our morning show? And I had wanted to be in TV my whole life. But here I had this great job at DNA Info, it was great, and I was like, oh, God, another crossroads, I'm sick of these things. But I was like, you know, I've always wanted to try it. So this was back in December. And I jumped into it, and it's been great. It's been a really interesting experience. It's morning television. We have more variety show than news show, so they let me do basically anything I want, cover anything I want, do goofy stuff, produce my own stuff. I also host a public affairs show, and then I went to WGN a little bit before that and said, hey, I'd like to try hosting. And they're like, oh, that's a great idea. It was one of those, again, like, tell someone what you want to do. And then they're like, how about Saturday into Sunday, 2 to 5 a.m., you co-host, you learn it, do it for 4 weeks. And I'm like, bah, there go my weekends again. But, you know, you're never too big on the ladder to like take those overnight shifts to like keep on earning it and keep on fighting for it. So did a lot of overnights, and I'll still do it. I mean, I'm hosting on Friday afternoon for the Noon Business Show, which is great. But in a couple weeks, they're like, oh yeah, we really needed someone Sunday night into Monday from 2 to 5 a.m. And I'm like, okay, I'll go Sunday night into Monday, 2 to 5, then go to WCIU at 5 a.m., do 5 a.m. to noon, so I'm not going to basically sleep for a couple days. But again, I mean, if you're hungry and you want to do it, you're going to say yes, and you're going to find a way to do it. And I can see everyone kind of agrees, especially like when you're just starting out, and I consider myself still there, that I'm still scratching and clawing my way up the ladder. You know, I think we all get it, but I think there comes a point sometimes where you start to feel like you're there, you're doing fine, and that might seem beneath you. You never get to that point. I meet a lot of people, and especially in the traffic world, who they've been there for 20, 30 years, and that's great. There's nothing wrong with that. But then they start asking, like, wow, why am I not advancing? I'm like, have you ever talked to someone and asked, you know, can I advance? Can I move forward? What can I do? They turn down overnight shifts, they turn down other stuff, and they're the ones that are still there. Which again, there's nothing wrong with that, but it's the people that, like, I'm always amazed at how few people actually are willing to like put in that time and the energy and effort and do the graveyard shifts or whatever it may be. You might think that everyone would do that, and I hope you do, but it's amazing. I'd say like 90% of the people don't jump at those opportunities. And that's like, I mean, talent is one thing, and presence and all the training is great, but like more than half the battle is just being there and saying yes. So that if there's one thing I could impart and advise, it'd be saying yes. The Blackhawks thing is really cool. I get to be the backup public address announcer for Gene Honda. Gene was one of the alumni of the radio station in college I worked for. I met him when I ran the radio station. And the segue into this is also that I've had a lot of good luck and a lot of good fortune in my kind of 5 years or 6 years since I've been back here in Chicago. But there's been so many things I didn't get, so many opportunities I not blew but didn't get. I was like in the top 5 for the Cubs public address announcer job. I don't know if you remember when that opened up a few years back. Didn't get that one. And then at CBS Channel 2, they had a traffic tryout contest to see who could be the traffic reporter. It's Derek Young now, and he won the contest, but it was between me and him and like one other person, and didn't get that either. And we're talking like huge gigs right away. And I mean, it gets you down, obviously, when you don't get those sorts of things. But, you know, do it with a little grace, get to know the people. And they had me fill in for Derek when he was gone a couple times because I didn't, you know, complain and run out the room and scream and stuff. Well, mainly because they revealed it on live television. You ever want to not get a job and find out on live television, have to sit there and smile and clap? It's the most awkward thing. So yeah, so the Hawks job, I talked to Gene. They're like, oh yeah, Gene's like, oh, they're looking for a new backup. Gene does the Final Four. He does the marathon. He does all at Frozen Four. He's probably the best public address announcer in the country. The guy who does it all. So he's on the road a lot, so he can't do every Hawks game. So they're like, oh yeah, I got you an audition at the United Center. I'm like, oh okay. I was young and dumb and didn't know any better, and they brought me in. They put a script in front of me. They put me on the loudspeaker. Michael Bublé was doing his sound test for the day. They had to wait for him to done. It was doing some concert, and they're like, "All right, go ahead and read." And I'm like, I mean, I've been to Blackhawks games. I know it, but I'm not even a public address. I didn't do public address ever before then. But again, it was just like confidence and bravado and fake it. And like I did 2 reads. They're like, "All right, yeah, you're hired." I don't know if they were taking it that seriously, but they're like, okay. And then, I mean, the first preseason game, Gene was gone for. He was calling a White Sox game. And it's an intense, you're on those speakers with all the scoreboard operators, all that stuff. They're directing, they're saying things at you. And it's just, I was scared shitless, I will say that. It was probably the most frightening moment of my life and career. But again, like, have faith in what you're doing, pretend like you know what you're doing, pretend you've been there before, and do it. And I've already done like 5 seasons, which is great. So I'm just blabbing on, and I feel bad. I always kind of just keep on talking. I can keep on talking for hours. I'd love to answer any questions you have about anything. But again, as you guys think of some great questions for me, I can see the minds going right now. Say yes to everything. Find whatever gig that might be and get it and go for it. Even if it's not the gig that you have like envisioned. People always ask me, they're like, well, what do you want to be when you grow up? Or what's your end goal? And I really don't have one. I just tell people I want to be the host of The Price is Right. Just because, so I have something to say to that. Like, that would be amazing. That's just what I say. But I don't laser focus on one specific thing. You kind of let your career meander a little bit. Especially in these early stages, like let it go where it goes, and don't get too down when there's moments to really get down, and that's something I need to take to heart too. I mean, it's funny because I was talking to the Lombard campus the other day, and I don't even give out my work email because I'm like, oh, it's TV. I could be fired tomorrow. I mean, who knows? Which would be, of course, unfortunate, but it's like roll with the punches, man. Just keep on fighting. If you really have that passion and want to do it, you're going to be successful. Because, again, as I said, it's surprising how many people don't have that drive and never lose it.